like without having a valid basis to discriminate against people who have all of these medical conditions that necessitate using this drug, you are saying we're going to make it harder for you. We are going to monitor you. It might not be available due to delay because of the process we're going to put on it. Like someone going into an emergency room with a gunshot wound, they're never going to stop and make sure they've got the right count of the medication before they stop that person from bleeding out, right? And for folks who have gastric surgery, who have ulcer issues, all of these folks, it's their physical condition that necessitates this drug, and they've passed this law that's discriminating against those people.
Welcome to Seriously, the podcast that dives into the baffling.
We can't send them to a prison where there's animals, where there's livestock.
The ridiculous.
Like omelets better than sex.
And downright unbelievable political climate in red states like Louisiana.
So we can't go there. There's no vegan jail.
Seriously.
Welcome to Seriously. We're your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Ellie.
And today we are talking about a lawsuit challenging Act 246. This is the law that passed in Louisiana in 2024 that adds mifepristone and misoprostol, the two medications that are commonly used for medication abortions, to the list of controlled dangerous substances. So our guests today are two of the lawyers working along with Ellie on that lawsuit. We have Jamila Johnson. Jamila is the co-director of litigation at the Lawyering Project, an organization that uses law to improve abortion access and uphold the rights and dignity of people seeking and providing abortion care. And Alex Moody is the staff attorney at Lift Louisiana, and everybody knows about Lift Louisiana because this is our podcast. So welcome, Alex and Jamila.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm really happy to be here.
So we are going to get deep into the weeds of this law and the litigation. But first, we are each going to talk about what our Seriously was this week. So who wants to get us started?
Not me, one of you. You've done this before.
I can start. Usually we try to be like good hostesses with letting our guests go first, but we're not really that polite anyway, so might as well. Okay, well, so I feel like my Seriouslys this week sort of fall into the ridiculous in our intro, but one being John Bolton's house being raided by the FBI, like a dawn raid of John Bolton's house, which it's like a Seriously for me in like sort of multiple respects. I mean, one obviously being that like the revenge and retribution tour of Trump is like fully being operationalized and in like the most performative way possible, right? Like this is not the kind of situation where you would normally expect like, an unannounced dawn raid of someone's house, like with all of the media there. So that's always a bad sign in our descent into authoritarianism. And also like I'm on John Bolton's side. Like that's a Seriously in and of itself. And like the Trump era, like Dick Cheney and I are like on the same side. Like John Bolton and I are on the same side. Like it's so unbelievable that the greatest villains of modern American history are now like the good guys, or at least like the okay guys, like compared to the actual government now. So multiple Seriouslys with that. And that also then made me think a lot in terms of like modern day villains is this whole the release of the interview with Ghislaine Maxwell, which there's so many, this is, that the DOJ interviewing Ghislaine Maxwell, the person interviewing her being Trump's personal lawyer, who now is the second in charge of the DOJ. So there's millions of things to unpack with all of that. And I haven't heard that much yet about what exactly this interview shows. But the one thing I did hear was that she says that Trump was a gentleman in all respects. Trump is a gentleman in all respects. It's like that is, I mean, first of all, obviously Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein are like first-class manipulators, right? I mean, like that's like probably their highest characteristic, both with young women and with powerful people writ large. So that's like what how Trump would want to think of himself. Like, he wouldn't come up with that himself. Like, he wouldn't say, I am a gentleman in all respects, but that's like exactly what he would want to hear. And obviously, like, I mean, the ridiculousness of that statement, even if you don't believe that he, the jury that found that he had sexually assaulted somebody, even if you don't believe Trump himself, when he said that because he was famous, he could grab women by the pussy, which he didn't deny ever saying that, right? Like, all of those things, but also like literally in the news segment, because I was like laughing as I heard this, the next news segment was Trump commenting on the Bolton raid and saying like, yeah, that guy's a sleaze bag. He's a sleaze bag. Like,
Yeah.
so gentlemanly.
For doing
It's like
exactly the same thing that Trump did.
in the Oval Office too. Like, he's what president in the Oval Office, like, to the media, calls someone who was his own national security advisor and the ambassador to the UN a sleazebag. Like, yeah, it's just gentleman in all respects.
Oh yeah, unbelievable.
So those are my seriouslies.
Jamila, do you want to do yours? I have it teed up.
Yeah, absolutely. So my seriously has to do with the insane world that we're in, where we are like currently having conversations about whether we should have household voting and whether a family should go by the husband's decision as to how to vote. And like the way this came to be a couple of weeks ago was that there was a retweet by Hegseth, and he was like, amen or something like that to this pastor in Idaho who was just like, like, why do we have individual voting? We should be voting by household. And, if the wife disagrees with the husband, they can discuss it, but ultimately he gets to cast that vote. Someone in like the senior cabinet administration who thinks it's okay to retweet the ramblings of this like ultra like white nationalist Christian future and his plan for women to stop being so loud and voting, right? Or like, how dare a wife ever vote differently from her husband? Like,
well, we'll never know because she won't be allowed to vote.
And how this happens after you get all of the flack for like the SAVE Act and like the like very clear restrictions and barriers that would cause for married women to vote, right? Because of the issue with maiden names. And then we're like, okay, let's just share this rant about these pesky women not voting with their husbands and household voting. Right?
And he's in charge of the military. I mean, let's not lose sight. Like,
I have the video. Do you want me to? I can play the video so y'all can all see it. Okay.
Roll the clip, Michelle.
Okay, I'm on it.
A big focus of his Christian movement is on a patriarchal society where men are dominant and women are expected to submit to their husbands.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
So you just think they're meant to have babies? That's it. They're just a vessel.
No, it doesn't take any talent to simply reproduce biologically. The wife and mother, who is the chief executive of the home, is entrusted with 3 or 4 or 5 eternal souls.
I'm here as a working journalist, and I'm a mom of 3.
Good for you.
Is that an issue
No.
for you?
No, it's not automatically an issue.
Josh and Amy Prince, along with their 4 kids, moved here from Washington State.
Do you see Amy as your equal?
Yes and no, in the sense that we're both saved by grace. We're absolutely on equal footing, but we have very different purposes, God-given.
But do you see yourself as the head of the household, as the man?
He is the head of our household.
Yes.
Yes, and I do submit to him.
So like moving here
I was just
was
gonna say that.
ultimately your decision.
Yes.
That's a great
example.
Wilson says in his vision of a Christian society, women as individuals shouldn't be able to vote. His fellow pastors, Jared Longshore and Toby Sumter, agree.
In my ideal society, we would vote as households. And I would ordinarily be the one that would cast the vote, but I would cast the vote having discussed it with my household.
But what if there's your wife doesn't want to vote for the same
Right.
person as you?
Right. Well, then that's a great opportunity for a good discussion.
There are some who have gone so far as to say that they want the 19th Amendment repealed.
I would support that. And I'd support it on the basis that the atomization that comes with our current system is not good for humans.
And Wilson, a veteran himself, is unapologetic about his view that women shouldn't be in certain leadership or combat roles.
Looking at the leadership page for Christ Church,
Right.
it's all men. Do you accept women in leadership roles in the church and government?
In the church, no.
Why?
Because the Bible says not to.
Yeah, so let's retweet that and as like a real great thing and say amen. All right, so then Hegseth is like questioned about this, or like the press officers are, and they're like, of course we support the 19th Amendment, but not like everything else that was said in this interview was crazy, or like not that this household voting thing is a bad idea. But of course Hegseth supports the 19th Amendment when he's on X resharing this and saying amen. That's my seriously.
The face of that CNN journalist is really priceless. I would like to just give her like a total like tip of the hat for doing the interview. Also, in this vision, I assume that if you're not married and you're a woman, like say, most of all of us, in fact, just currently speaking, then you can't vote at all. I mean, I assume that's just obvious, right? In this vision.
And like this religious movement is coming out of Idaho, and I know like this podcast is like, oh, like what it's like to be in red like southern states, but like Idaho also red conservative.
Yeah, no, we cover some Idaho crap too. Yeah,
absolutely. And right, like so Idaho closed down its maternal mortality commission, and then it like eventually begrudgingly restarted it again. And the first report came out in January from this newly established. And within that report, they say one of the risk factors for maternal mortality is being unmarried, right? Like just loving where this is going in Idaho. And by loving, I mean hating. And that these views are making it across the country, are showing up in key positions in Trump's administration. Freaking terrifying. And yeah, seriously.
And being upheld by the fucking Supreme Court. And, my God.
You're not afraid to say the quiet part loud anymore, which is a bummer.
Yeah. At least we know what we're dealing with.
The quiet part that like used to be like people who basically lived under rocks, like, I mean, the quiet part of like, absolute most fringe members of our society. Anyway.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll go next. So my seriously is the executive order that the White House put out that they are conducting an internal review of the exhibitions at the Smithsonian.
Mm-hmm.
And the executive order says, this initiative aims to ensure alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. Like, none of those things are actually going to occur.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Too much slavery is that's literally like, I mean, I think he's openly said, like, again, like the quiet part. He thinks that the Smithsonian is like covering the history of slavery too much.
Yeah.
Which I assume means at all.
Yeah, and like giving J.D. Vance the power to he entrusted J.D. Vance to look at the African American Museum, right? Like I've been angry about this since that statement came out, and my fury, like in a world where there's so much happening, my anger levels have been like a little unpredictable. What's gonna like set it off? And just the J.D. Vance will be in charge of figuring out what of the Black experience is worth celebrating. It is just infuriating to me. And like, so we have armed guards on the streets of DC.
Mm-hmm.
We have people being kidnapped in the streets. And like the J.D. Vance thing happens. I'm like screaming. Like, stay away from the Smithsonian. Like, we're in a world where I cannot regulate anymore appropriately.
But I mean, Trump has already said, though, their plan, I don't know if he has this executive order yet, though, is to review all museums, like
Yeah, yeah.
nationwide.
Yeah.
He called museums the last like bastion of woke or some crap like that. Like, so like they're like any museum, I guess, that gets any sort of, National Endowment for the Arts, like any kind of like grant funding, whatever, from some random branch of the federal government, like they're gonna be here looking at the CAC, like looking at like every museum, history museums, art museums, every museum. I mean, it's like it's right in line with the law firms and the universities, but like maybe even crazier, honestly.
Just for those who this is going to like cause them to like flee the country, I'm looking for some good lamps. So just put it out there. You're leaving the country and you're in like driving distance of New Orleans and you can't take a good lamp with you, like send it my way, because it's things like this that are triggering what does feel like an exodus of some really great people. And, I could use some lamps because I'll be going down with this ship. And
yeah. So obviously this is directed.
You do it.
Obviously, this is directed at the African American History Museum and the Native American museums in as part of the Smithsonian, I think specifically. But it also started making me think like, okay, so they make it into the Natural History Museum as well and want to rewrite some of that. So we're going to have humans sitting on top of dinosaurs in the Natural History Museum. I mean,
waving an American flag.
Exactly.
Waving an American flag.
I mean, that's historically accurate, Jamila. I'm not sure what you're talking about. So, yeah.
Oh my God.
Both America and dinosaurs and humans all at the same time.
Yeah. And weren't we exceptional?
We were. Yeah. All right, Alex, what you got?
Okay. My seriously has to do with everybody's favorite AG of Texas, Ken Paxton.
Mm.
Yeah, this actually happened a few weeks ago, but I found out about it this week and I'm still mad. So he sued an adult recreational swim league, like think like adult kickball, but swimming, for letting trans women compete. Like where they're competing for fun and no money at all.
What's just like action over this? It's just happening in Texas, I guess.
It's happening. It's like a national organization called Masters Swimming. Yeah, no, he's just like very mad about adults having fun and being open to trans folks.
What is the basis of that lawsuit?
I couldn't stomach the complaint. I didn't read it, but
I am curious. That's what I mean. What's his jurisdiction? I mean, like, just like, are we now, like, can people, like, come to, like, if I have a party at my house, can the government come and, like,
like,
do me on the guest list? Like, I mean, what's limiting principle here? No freedom of association if Ken Paxton doesn't like it?
I think he's just trying to distract from his felony charges.
I mean,
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
It's a distraction, but it is a distraction that I didn't hear. It's great for him and causing a lot of harm in the meantime.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I want to look into that. I want to see what's the theory of this
listeners
like
will
very small
will
organization.
The legal complaints are getting weirder and weirder and weirder as the months go by. Like, I forgot which intervention motion. One of the intervention motions on the MIFI litigation, like the standing was based on the decrease of teen pregnancy and that there wasn't enough children being brought into the world by teenagers, and that was like their standing. And so things are getting weirder and weirder and weirder.
So this is what people who used to make money off of pregnant teenagers, I guess. At least that's very honest. Like, we are not making the kind of money we used to.
And as a former teen mom, I'm just saying, like, I'm offended by every part of this as a standing argument, but it's wild.
Unbelievable. Thank you both for coming prepared to talk about more awful shit happening in our country. All right, well, let's get into the topic of the day. So we're going to be talking about Act 246. Again, this is the law that passed in Louisiana in 2024, unnecessarily adding mifepristone and misoprostol to the schedule of controlled dangerous substances. So there was an original purpose of this law, and what was that? Ellie, why don't you tell us what the original purpose of the law was?
Sure. So you're talking about, yes, Louisiana Senator Thomas Presley, and what was SB 276, it became Act 246. So some folks will remember this. The bill started out as a bill to create the crime of coerced abortion by means of abortion inducing drug. I think it was coerced abortion by means of fraud, or means of fraud with an abortion inducing drug. And it's like stems from a personal story. His sister in Texas, like her husband did some shit basically where, laced her drinks with misoprostol. There's a whole lot to the story, blah blah blah. But there's at least some truth to the story. And, as Michelle and I have talked about in many different forums, I mean, no one supports that someone should, against their will, against their knowledge and consent, that someone should be giving them a drug to try to induce a miscarriage, try to induce an abortion. So that's what happened to her. And of course, there's also like laws. There are laws in Texas, there's laws here, there's laws everywhere that would already protect people from that sort of criminal behavior. But Presley wanted to have like a law that was specific to that, and in particular to have a law that had like much higher criminal penalties for that sort of behavior. So that was what the bill was about for a long time, for like most of the legislative session, until we got to the committee in the House, to ACJ, one of our faves. Longtime listeners know how much we love the Committee on Criminal Injustice. And it was a real doozy with this bill. They were fully in on the bait and switch with what was then added as an amendment to just, to transform the bill into a whole other topic that no one was expecting.
Yeah. Alex, you were with us at the legislature when all of this was going down. So there was a hearing in the Criminal Justice Committee. This amendment was added lickety-split
minutes before. Yeah.
And they sort of tried to put on some explanation for it, but they basically passed the amendment immediately after introducing it.
Well, not just that. I mean, to be clear, it had not been publicly posted at all either. I mean, which, again, longtime listeners will know that like that's not super uncommon, although it is against legislative practice and all sort of reason that you would, like everyone comes thinking one thing is going to happen. And then like right at the beginning, then the bill authors are like, actually, ta-da, here's an amendment. We've totally changed the bill. Usually it's at least like on the same bill though, where it's just like adding whole other things, changing whole other things. This is essentially was adding a different bill to this bill that was, scheduling these two drugs, adding these two drugs to Schedule 4 of the Controlled Dangerous Substances Act. And like, no one knew this was coming. Presley just goes to the table and says, we have an amendment, and they read this out. And like, we're all in the audience being like, what? Like, what is happening? And then, then the lickety split part happens of like, just, a couple sentences of why this is NBD, just like totally no big deal. And then that's it.
Yeah. So they did
bring a bunch of people to testify too. Like.
Yeah, they did. Yeah. They brought Kim Hardy, who is a former OBGYN, retired. I don't know.
No, definitely retired. Well, yeah, I guess.
Yeah,
he's like $1 million.
Yeah. And with good reason. So I'm going to play a clip of what he said when he came to the table to support this and kind of be their expert witness.
Those two drugs, the old RU-486, it's used in abortion under the name of mifepristone. But then Cytotec, that's not used for hardly anything else, but Cytotec is commonly used to induce labor, to induce a miscarriage in non-viable pregnancies. So making them controlled substances wouldn't really affect their availability to doctors, but it would be watched by the pharmacy, Louisiana State Board of Pharmacy, so you'd be able to see who's prescribing these drugs more clearly.
There's like one thing that's true about that statement and one thing that's not true about that statement in the like NBD of Kim Hardy, who is, to be clear for folks then, he's an outlier OBGYN. Not only is he retired, he's like very much a pro-life OBGYN. And he's one of the only people that they ever get to come to the Capitol. So, there's reason to doubt usually like what he says in terms of whether it would be supported by the OBGYN community writ large. And yeah, as we'll see, this fell very much into that category of like, okay, well, his take on it is like really different from what, the community of OBGYNs think in general. But yeah, which statement was true, which statement was not at all true that Dr. Kim Hardy had to say.
Well, first of all, he should know how to pronounce the drug that he's testifying about. That made me laugh and cry a little bit. They do trot him out for like everything to like just go up there and be like, the laws are fine. Everything's great. Even though he's not practicing and has never practiced under the abortion ban.
Yes.
But yeah, his whole statement about like, it's not going to affect how doctors prescribe or whether or not it's available when like very clearly it has, and like direct result from this law.
Yeah.
And the true part being though that we being the state are going to be able to surveil now who is prescribing and who is not. So
who's prescribing and who's picking it up. Like what patients are like, your medical records are now just more public because of this law.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought that it was interesting. I mean, they did talk a little bit about the other uses of the medications, but I think for people who don't know that much about these medications and also don't know what the controlled dangerous substances schedule is, like, Jamila, do you want to explain a little bit more about like what these medications are used for and if they're anything like any of the other drugs that are on the schedule?
Yeah, just for context, I think when people think about controlled dangerous substances, they think the federal government decides that, and every state is in line, and like we know that like Percocet and Oxy are dangerous, and we should be doing something about that, and like that's just how the world works. Each state has their own list of drugs that they think are dangerous and addictive. Right. And this idea is that you need to monitor them so somebody doesn't get too much of it and doesn't like overdose or doesn't have serious addiction issues. And there aren't like pill mills where there's a doctor prescribing a lot of a substance that a community has become addicted to. Right. Like that's why we have the Controlled Dangerous Substances Act. And like I'm not going to say that I'm a fan of monitoring of anyone's medical records. But part of that is a monitoring system, which allows the government to see who's getting these drugs. Let's talk about what the drugs at issue here do. They are not mind-altering substances. They are not breaking the blood-brain barrier. No one's getting euphoria from Miffy, right? Like these aren't the types of drugs that show up on these lists, number one. They're used for a bunch of other purposes, such as miscarriage management. They're used with some IUD insertions. They're used when someone is pregnant giving birth and they want to speed up that birthing process, right? But like incredibly importantly, also, misoprostol is used when someone is hemorrhaging after giving birth, right? And like when you hemorrhage, you lose as much blood as quickly as a gunshot, right? So where nurses used to keep a supply in their pocket, so it would be available quickly to be able to handle an unexpected hemorrhage postpartum, we're now like, where's your locked box? Checking in, checking out the drugs, everything that you would do with Oxy, you're now doing something that time matters, like seconds matter.
Mm-hmm.
The more blood you lose, the worse outcomes come after your delivery. And like we're like, yeah, same as Oxy. Let's treat these drugs in similar ways. So Louisiana added it to Schedule 4, which makes it so that possession of the drug, for instance, without a prescription, if you're not a pregnant person intending to use it for yourself, puts you in the gambit of all of the sorts of crazy drug laws that Louisiana has, right? And there are all the sorts of enhancers based on your proximity, for instance, to a school or a church. And if you live in New Orleans, there is like almost nowhere you can stand where you are not in proximity of public housing, a school, or a church, right? So all of those things that we've done to enhance criminal penalties now apply to someone who might be possessing a drug that they like have because they have an IUD procedure the day, and like maybe they don't have their prescription on them immediately to show an officer, right? Like this is the
or that they take the medications for ulcers. I mean, they're also, or for Cushing's. Dr. Hardy didn't know that apparently, but yeah, there are also maintenance drugs for certain conditions.
And like this idea that, right, like after bariatric surgery, like there's a long list of uses of all of these drugs. But like the main takeaway, nobody is going out to get high off of Miffy or misoprostol. Like it's just not gonna happen. And yet this is how we've decided to move into the space.
Yeah. I mean, just along those lines, then the reason that drugs that are scheduled are required to have some level of addiction, right? They're required, as you were talking about, to, the drug itself, create some level of physical or psychological dependence, is that that's a public health balance, right? That like our society has decided is like, these are drugs like opioids. They're drugs that like people need, but they're also drugs that like could cause harm in terms of addiction. So that's why we're controlling them. That's why we're regulating them. Like here, then that's not at play, like at all. So there isn't a balance. It's just a matter of wanting to regulate and control these drugs because they're also used to induce an abortion. But
let's be clear, abortion is already unlawful in Louisiana through these drugs in almost all circumstances. Like the improper prescription or distribution of these drugs has been unlawful since 2022. So there was no reason to do this beyond, I think, casing in Louisiana, which has a history of incredibly problematic usage of its drug laws to ravage communities. And like I think we also get back to how this started, right? And I think as you and Michelle were saying, nobody should be dosed with a drug that they don't want to consume. Right? People should have
any purpose.
Their body. Yeah. I'm with you. Right? Like that is also unlawful in a bunch of other ways. But in some ways, it's like it's the anti-abortion movement using as a creative vehicle this idea of coerced abortion. And we see this happening in Texas right now with the lawsuit of the woman being represented by Jonathan Mitchell.
Yes.
Where she's suing providers for wrongful death in association with another dosing sort of situation, something that is already unlawful and like already exists out there. But it's a vehicle for it's being used as a vehicle in Texas now, at least for fetal personhood. Right?
Yeah.
But like what we're going to start seeing is across the country, having conversations about dosing and having those really have impacts that are really substantial to all of the other areas of reproductive health.
Yeah. So I agree 100% that what they've done here and why this bill did become like the perfect vehicle for this is that because of everything we've said so far, like these drugs don't qualify for under the like absolute requirements under the law for the types of drugs you can schedule. But one of the things that the law talks about is drugs that can be abused and whether there's a history of abuse. And so that's how now they're using this language and this concept of people getting the drugs to give them to someone without their consent as the abuse that is going on as the justification to be able to say that, like, no, these drugs do fit into that.
That's not the way that abuse has been used under the statute. And like, we don't actually know because the city said very little so far about why it thinks these drugs qualify to be controlled and dangerous.
They said plenty of stuff during the legislative session about it, but yeah, it's that word in like a completely different context than it's ever been used in the statute, and basically just ignoring the statute. They don't care. What they care about is the narrative, like the public narrative, and it's about vilifying these drugs. And this is all the tactic. The Presley story is the narrative that starts getting us there. The adding them to the list helps get us there because then they're dangerous. So that's sort of this is an evolving story as you're saying, Jamila, but
Yeah.
that's what's going on. Yeah.
And the Texas litigation is just this additional layer where like this vehicle is being used to establish fetal personhood as well. So it's really quite terrifying.
That's right. Yep, that's the coerced abortion in general. Yeah, so that we're there's a lot of this is playing out in different ways across the country, but there's a through line.
But on a nice note, right? We saw like what 5, 6 bills. Don't quote me on that. 5 or 6 bills across the country that would have just replicated what Louisiana did in 2024 this past session, and none of those bills advanced.
Yes, and I think that sort of I think is a good maybe a good like transition to what our lawsuit is about, and what the impact, what the fallout has been of this like not really well vetted at all late added idea to just like let's go ahead and schedule the drugs, because I think that is why there has been hesitation, at least in other states, to go all in on this.
Well, I mean, like ultimately the law is discriminatory, right? Like without having a valid basis to discriminate against people who have all of these medical conditions that necessitate using this drug, you are saying we're going to make it harder for you. We are going to monitor you. It might not be available due to delay because of the process we're going to put on it. Like someone going into an emergency room with a gunshot wound, they're never going to stop and make sure they've got the right count of the medication before they stop that person from bleeding out. Right? For folks who have gastric surgery, who have ulcer issues, all of these folks, it's their physical condition that necessitates this drug. And they've passed this law that's discriminating against those people.
Yeah, Alex, that's one of our the claims in the lawsuit. Alex, do you want to talk about the other claim, like the process claim in the lawsuit? Because I think it's not as sexy, but it's really important.
Says who?
But in a constitution, Michelle.
Yeah. Process arguments very sexy in my house.
Yeah, I mean, for our fellow legal nerds, the kind of, Jessica Picos and Melissa Murrays and Leah Littmans of the world that love some administrative procedure law. Alex, tell us a little bit about like the process claim.
Sure. So we had a germane amendment claim, which goes back to that whole, like, they just like tacked on this amendment that really didn't have anything to do with the original purpose of the law, just to see if it would work, I guess. And so because we have like this single object requirement for legislation in Louisiana, tacking on a random amendment is creating this new crime.
But they are kind of two halves of the same. It's two different things that the legislature can do to fuck up the process. But the policy part, the policy reason for that is the same.
It's an important part of the claim, because the thing is like it's not like the legislature was not made aware that the way that they were doing this was problematic, was not following the process. There were ample opportunities for them to do it better, and they didn't take those.
But the reason for this is that legislators are not supposed to have to vote on up or down vote on two different things, right? And this bill is a perfect example of that. And actually, a lot of the discussion in the Senate goes to this point. This bill passed unanimously in the Senate. Senator Presley's colleagues, like being, sympathetic to the story that he thought about his sister and the very specific thing that he was trying to do, passed unanimously out of the Senate. When it came back with this amendment, it was very, very controversial. The public health and OBGYN community in Louisiana was flipping out. And there were many, many people, most of the Democrats at least, that told him, I mean, this was in the public debate about it, like, I supported your bill, but like, I can't support this other thing. So you're asked to do an up or down vote on something that is a bill that's doing two different things. And that's why both for legislators, that's a problem. It's like an omnibus bill then, basically. Where it's like, I like some of this, I don't like some of that. Like a bill is supposed to have one single object. And then in terms of notice to like that's part of the germane amendment part. Adding something on that like doesn't really have anything to do with what the bill started out as, people even knowing that that's happening is very problematic.
I mean, what's wild about this, right? As we were saying before, nobody wants someone to be drugged against their will and knowledge with like any medication. Like we are all in agreement of that. And for those who voted against it, right? Like there's someone out there who's saying, oh, they voted against it because they want people to be drugged against their will. Like that is the heart of what you're saying, Ellie, is that like those votes become hard in a way that they shouldn't be.
That's right.
They take away the ability for a lawmaker to say like, these are my values, this is what I'm interested in, this is where I stand, in a way that like other people can understand. What someone's just going to see is, hey, Senator blank like thinks we should all be drugged in our morning coffee, right? That's why Article 3, Section 15 doesn't permit this. And that's the other reason why this law is unconstitutional.
That's a really good point, Jamila. And I guess I had never had even really thought about it in those terms. But I do think, legislators should want there to be clear separation if, from the law doing two different things that they may not agree with both of those things.
I was watching some of the debate again last night, and like it's why so many of them, and I mean I had forgotten this, but like went to the floor and told Presley again how like we're really still really sorry about what happened to your sister and really do like take that seriously, but the bill now I can't vote for. I mean, like they wanted that not just the public record, they wanted him to know that personally. But yeah, that's 100% the problem when like a bill is doing multiple things. And also, of course, in this scenario too, which was a huge point in the Senate, is that like it also wasn't well vetted. Like, I mean, it was stacked on, as we've talked about, with no debate, no real ability for the medical community to weigh in.
Except for Dr. Hardy, who
Right.
can't
And so,
even pronounce the fucking medication.
Who needs to know about what anybody else got to say? We got Dr. Hardy on record.
Yeah.
The process that you've already outlined was that the amendment was added in committee. When was the amendment made public?
The amendment was made public in committee.
Given that the amendment was made public in committee, that means that the healthcare community or anybody who may have had an interest in learning about this issue or speaking on this issue didn't have a lot of time prior to committee to do so, correct?
The legislative process, as
I'm asking you about this instance.
And I'm
the
answering the
process.
question respectfully.
Respectfully, did they have time prior to the amendment being made public to prepare for committee?
Our legislative process allows for individuals.
I'm not asking you what it allows for. I'm asking, did they have time prior to the committee to prepare?
I believe the public had the opportunity to review the amendments, as is customary in our legislative process.
But like, it's not a small thing to add a drug to a controlled substances list, because like our controlled substances infrastructure is so big. So like, what does this mean? It changes things for manufacturers. It changes things for all distributors. It changes how people hold drugs, how they account for those drugs, where those drugs can be, who can handle those drugs, when they can be handled. Like all of those different things were added with a few lines to this bill. And like, if you aren't in favor of expanding and making more extreme the regulatory structure, if you're not in favor of adding additional drugs to a penalty system that has like gotten us to be the incarceration capital of the world, right? Like, you have to get up and say, I'm so sorry, Senator Presley, what's happened to your loved one, and then try to vote against it. And that is going to be hard for some people. They are not going to be in the political position to be able to do that. And the outcome is the people who need these medications are going to get delayed in their ability to use them.
Yeah, but also, I mean, here, in terms of the vetting, like, this isn't just a situation about, like, just all the criminal justice aspects that you're talking about, Jamila. It's what we were talking about before, that, like, this is a whole novel theory of like scheduling these drugs, period, right? Like there's really no dispute at all that they don't fit the typical criteria. So it's a novel theory of why we can add them. And then also, like it turns out, which is again maybe why the novel theory isn't such a good idea, that part of what it's different in terms of the impact is that these drugs are used for emergencies.
Yeah.
And the other drugs that are on the schedule are not.
Yeah.
There was adding something like late and in an unvetted way that, as you're saying, will have serious legal repercussions, but also where the medicine side of this is like, this wasn't like it was like just a different opioid that like, sure, maybe people would also have wanted to talk about whether it should, whether it meets the standard or whatever. But like, this was like a whole different fucking idea.
Yeah.
And
our litigation isn't about the criminal justice side, right? Like it's about those medical emergencies.
Right.
But the criminal justice or injustice side of this
is important.
Huge, right?
Yeah.
And it's those addictive qualities that are the reason why we have more extreme penalties if you give this to a minor, if there's more than a 5-year age difference, if you're next to a school, if you're next to a church, right? And like, let's be honest, while, you probably shouldn't have been doing it, like folks, when they heard about the law changing, they got advanced prescriptions from other states so that they could be safe if they needed to and have an ability to make a decision, right? And then with one foul swoop, those people were criminalized. Those folks are not accepted from the law, and that criminalization in the incarceration capital of the world is a problem. How that impacts people who have criminal records, who are on parole, like it's still feeding into Louisiana's structure of incarceration, and it's pretty devastating in that regard as well, even if that's not the focus of our litigation. And the focus of our litigation are people hemorrhaging who need this medication. It is also a reality of what was done in the legislature that day.
And just to be clear, when you were talking before about when people found out about the law, you mean about the trigger ban? People,
so like
were very worried.
Happened. Folks have this in their medicine cabinet, and those folks now can be massively criminalized as a result of this.
And in terms of the vetting, like the legislative theory is that committee is where you're going to get into the meat of especially administration of criminal justice. They should be talking about these things, and they did not. They had a 30-second conversation about it and then just passed it through. And then it didn't even go to it wasn't even on the bill yet in the Senate committee. So there was absolutely no vetting of this. There was no discussion of the actual impacts of it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, back to, that the process, and I think, most of our listeners will know, but committee is the only time that the public can weigh in. Committee is the only time there's testimony. It's the only time that experts can weigh in. And we were there. I was the only person who testified against this bill, which was what was the plan to begin with, because I was the only person who was going to testify against the bill as introduced, the coerced abortion bill, because Presley eventually amended it. The bill was doing some other bad shit to begin with already in terms of trying to expand criminalization for what it meant to attempt an abortion in other contexts. So nobody was there to talk against this bill on what it was about other than me. And then all of a sudden it was about something totally different. So no one was there. And then it was over.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to give you your flowers, Ellie. You did great.
Thank you.
Hundreds of doctors afterwards,
within days. I mean, within literally days. And there was, and 300 doctors and other medical professionals signed on to a letter to Thomas Presley and to, the legislators explaining the problems with this. And by all accounts, the switchboards were lighting up at the Capitol in both the House and on the Senate, because it had to go back for concurrence. There were people had a lot, the medical community had a lot to say about this.
Yeah.
And I'll say, Representative Landry came to the floor in the House and talked about the process and had a pretty spicy back and forth with Representative Billio, who was defending the process that she oversaw as chair of the Criminal Justice Committee. And
Which
I have
she
a clip.
mischaracterized. The video.
There is no
record is the
consent in
record.
that committee. Yeah. That committee is wild.
Did you know that this bill was debated with the amendment? It was debated in my criminal justice committee, and it was debated by doctors on both sides. When you say it went through very quickly, clearly you didn't watch the video of the hearing, did you?
I watched the part where it was filed or adopted or accepted when no objection was stated. Like I said, there were doctors there for the other bills, and I know many of them, or some of them, I don't know how many, and didn't watch all the way through for their testimony, but I did speak to some of them, that they did go up to the table to talk about it. They were not prepared to talk about that, and I don't think all of them or any of them were experts in controlled substances.
So the answer to my question is you did not watch the video.
I watched some of the video. I watched specifically when the amendment was adopted.
Yeah, exactly, which is in the beginning of the hearing and not the whole hearing. And so Representative Landry, do you know that the scheduling of drugs always goes to the Criminal Justice Committee? Are you aware of that? Are you aware of the roles and responsibilities of that committee?
This one, because in particular, because it's not addictive like the rest of them are, has huge repercussions on everyday medical care. It has never been discussed that this should happen. The pills, the prescription I'm talking about has not changed. The politics has changed of it.
I understand, Representative Landry. So the answer to that question is yes, the scheduling of drugs goes to Criminal Justice Committee.
For addictive drugs, yes.
And so the Schedule 4 drugs goes to Criminal Justice. And Representative Landry, are you aware that in no way when you go with all your fear mongering, that doctors aren't going to be able to prescribe it and that patients aren't going to be able to access it, that couldn't be farther from the truth? And in fact, the bill is pretty clear about that.
I did not say that they couldn't access it, is that it would be that much harder for them, in particular in small clinics in rural areas.
Thank you, Representative Landry. I disagree with you. The amendment was carried and the bill was carried in criminal justice where it belonged. Thank you.
So Rep. Landry tried to get the amendment removed on the floor, making these arguments like the public didn't have a chance to weigh in. This isn't germane to the original bill. And yeah, it got through anyway.
And on any given day, these lawmakers are getting so many communications, right? Those 300 doctors their communications may not have gotten through, right? And that's why committee is so important. But I also shout out to those medical professionals who continue to care after the bad thing happened, right? Particularly the doulas who came immediately to the defense of the people who they work with. Birthmark Doula Collective, Birthmark being a plaintiff in this case, right? Because their clientele, the people that they work with, who they advocate through the birthing process with, are the folks who are most likely to need this medication at the point in time of postpartum. And the OBGYNs that joined in January to the litigation, we have a midwife client, but also the advocates who would have been in that legislature, who would have been testifying, Caitlin Joshua, Nancy Davis, who had their ability to do so taken away from them, right? They didn't have the chance to give that testimony that they would have given about how harmful this is to the public health in Louisiana.
Yeah, it has been. There wasn't a lot of time to get it together to even file this lawsuit. I mean, they did delay slightly the effective date of the bill, but the law did go into effect October 1st of 2024. But the lawsuit was filed pretty quickly after that.
Yeah.
Halloween.
Yeah.
And I didn't do a shout out to also, we have a pharmacist and a family practitioner who are just amazing advocates for their community, for speaking out.
Why don't one or both of you guys just sort of take a step back, just walk us through the lawsuit? Who are the plaintiffs? What are the claims? I feel like we've sort of gotten into the meat of it, but maybe just a step back.
I've been doing a lot of talking. Alex, you want to jump in?
Sure. So just to reiterate what Jamila went over, we have a pharmacist, a family practitioner, a group of OBGYNs, and we have a midwife and a group of doulas. We do want to shout them out for one being amazing advocates for their community, but also being extremely brave because their government name goes on the lawsuit. And when things are controversial, that is a risk that they're taking to advocate for folks. And so we're so appreciative that they were willing to go on this litigation journey with us.
And each and every one of our plaintiffs have been injured because this law changes how they do their job, like how they handle these medications, but it also impacts their patients and their clients. And so like those folks are injured too.
The constitutional claim is held, right, both on behalf of the provider, our actual plaintiffs, and also on behalf of their patients. Yeah, but go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so the Louisiana Constitution has a specific clause protecting physical condition, which isn't in the federal constitution. So this is specifically a Louisiana claim.
So it's an equal protection claim. Like at the core, that's our main claim, as we've sort of been trying to explain it, about why it's discriminatory, that sort of thing. This is under our Louisiana Constitution, though, which protects one of the, we talked a lot about suspect classes, Michelle, and our longtime listeners, or if they're longtime from a week ago, will know now a lot about what qualifies you to be a suspect class or a law to classify on a basis that gets heightened scrutiny. And our Louisiana Constitution, one of those bases is physical condition, and that is different than the federal Constitution. So that's that goes to all of the things that we've been talking about that this law is treating people differently depending on what their physical condition is, depending on, if you need these drugs because you're hemorrhaging versus if you were losing just as much blood from a gunshot wound and you need different drugs, then, your care is no different. Or all of the other things we've been talking about, that if you need a drug in a similar, if you have ulcers, you take a different drug, you're not in the PMP, you take this drug, this is the one you need, you're in the PMP. Your ability to get refills is limited. And as the prescriber, you're on the list now for prescribing these drugs. So there's a whole host of different ways that it treats people differently who essentially are in the same situation. Like when we were conceiving of this, that I was thinking about it, it is if you lived in the same household with somebody who, let's go back to the you have Cushing's or you have ulcers or something like that. And, you live with somebody who has colitis. They have some sort of similar medical condition, but that's different. That's treated by a different drug. Then they're going to pick up their shit at the pharmacy, no problem. Anybody can go get it. They can get, a year's supply. There's their private information isn't put into the PMP. It's very easy. And then you who have a different medical condition that's very similar, you're subjected to all of this shit. So a regular person would be wait, what? Why is this so hard for me?
And I think we all understand that government shouldn't treat people who are in similar situations differently, right? Period.
Without a rational reason, right?
And what I may be interesting to just me and nobody else, but Louisiana didn't even have an equal protection clause until 1974, right? And it created one way later than the other states. And it was very thoughtful when it thought through the individual dignities that someone should have and what we trust our government to do and how we trust our government to do it and what we allow our government to discriminate or as a rationale, right? So the rationale cannot be your physical condition, right? Your discrimination impact cannot be without a good reason. It can't be the basis of treating folks differently, right? And and we all know in Louisiana that we have a huge history of treating people differently.
Yes.
And in the 70s, Louisiana was we are writing one of the latest equal protection clauses in the country, and we're going to get it right. And what they created really makes it so that this law should not be on the book.
Yeah. And again, this goes back to Michelle and my recent discussion about the stuff at the federal level. But the point being that, if you are discriminating on the basis of physical condition, if you are classifying on that basis, then the law is subject to heightened scrutiny. The government has to have a good reason, and the law has to further that reason. And here, then, there's just there's basis for. I mean, we'll see. We're in the middle of litigation, but that's the issue, is that, like, if your law does do that, then you have to have a really good reason, and you have to be able to show that not only do we have a good reason, but the method we chose is furthering that reason.
And trying to show that you are the most anti-abortion state in the country is not a good reason for discriminating against the people who live here. Discriminating against those who need to pick up medication at a pharmacy, discriminating against those who
are in an emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially because access to healthcare in the state is already really difficult. And now we're just adding a bunch of additional hoops specifically to things that impact reproductive health, which is like all of our health metrics around pregnancy are abysmal. So
And
adding additional hoops for people to jump
mortality.
through. Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of hemorrhaging, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just kind of throwing gas on the fire.
And like, not to like, uh, beat a dead horse. That is a weird phrase. But like, it's the criminalization of healthcare, right? Like, that is what has been happening in this country since June of 2022.
Right.
It had been happening before, but like June of 2022, like, we fully criminalized important and necessary and safe method of healthcare. And what we continue to do is further entrench healthcare into a criminal system.
Yeah. And I think that the sort of added thing here is that we're also basically criminalizing and or subjecting just other medical care to the criminal justice realm and to the government regulatory realm, because it's somehow sort of adjacent to abortion care. So it's like we're letting this now bleed over also, because the people who are in favor of this want to do everything they can to make these drugs impossible for people to get for the purposes of an abortion. So that's got its own policy problems. But now, in addition to that, then we're creating all these problems for people who need these medications for totally other and sometimes life-saving purposes.
Yeah. And, it does not make it any more illegal to get an abortion. That is already unlawful. There is no change there. Like, that is like, it is unlawful for almost all conditions in Louisiana to get an abortion in Louisiana, right? It's not furthering that purpose at all, except getting Louisiana in the newspapers once again, as it battles with Texas and as it battles with Idaho and Missouri and Tennessee in this world of like, who is most committed to being anti-abortion?
The most pro-life state in America.
Yeah.
I saw a tweet that said Louisiana is the safest place for unborn children. And I was like, I don't think that that's true based on our health metrics. But
No.
I mean, infant mortality rates are very high here. That's unrelated to abortion, to be clear. That's not what that metric is looking at.
But, like, a lot of folks in our community experience a miscarriage in their lives, right?
Yes.
And like, that time is a difficult time. And if in the course of that miscarriage, you're going to have to go to a pharmacy and you're going to have to ask that pharmacist for the medication that's necessary to safely complete your miscarriage, and that pharmacist turns you away because a doctor didn't put a portion of what they're required to do for a controlled substance on your prescription. Like, if that pharmacy has stopped carrying this drug because they don't want to deal with the controlled substances aspects of the drug for something that may not be used all that often for them, right? Like, you are subjecting people who are in a particularly vulnerable moment to the bureaucracy and to that like anti-abortion agenda, who are like grieving a loss.
And not just grief, I mean, 100% in terms of like the psychological state that people are in, but also like, a precarious physical state. I mean, if if you do not complete a miscarriage in a timely manner, which is the reason you would be prescribed these drugs, you can develop sepsis. You can further hemorrhage, in the course of a miscarriage. So like, similarly to the postpartum hemorrhage situation, like it's not necessarily quite as fast, but it's very time sensitive getting access to these drugs, and sometimes you'll need a refill, and then you're back in this whole
Yeah. And there've been some studies done locally that are showing that fewer and fewer places are stocking the medication because of all of this, right? Like it's impacting whether people are willing to distribute the medication to pharmacies in Louisiana, whether manufacturers are like going to deal with Louisiana at all. And that makes every person who's going through a miscarriage less safe. It makes everyone who needs this medication less able to get it. And at the same time, everyone's privacy is being impacted in such a detrimental way. Like, you know, if I needed cholesterol medication, I wouldn't want the federal government to be able to tell at any given point in time. A district attorney, a member of law enforcement, right? Like that's my medical information. Why are you in my medical records? But we're saying predominantly to women who are the predominant users, not the only users of these medications, that their medical privacy matters less and the government can be in it and it can criminalize folks in relation to it.
Yeah, and I think like just to sort of like further that, then the people, of course, who have passed these laws constantly want to say is that like, no, but if you need these drugs for a legal purpose, for these legal purposes that we've been talking about, that you can get them, it's still legal. But the problem being that like there's basically no other drugs. I mean, I think there literally are no other drugs that like are if it's for one purpose and illegal if it's for another purpose. So then like people who are dispensing the drugs, people who are distributing the drugs to our state, people who are even the prescribers too, like they have to figure out how it's going to look from the outside. And both in terms of, am I going to get in trouble? And also, is my patient going to be able to get what they need? Because like the purpose that you're being prescribed the drug, how does anyone else know from the outside? Like, again, Jamila, when you go to when anyone goes to the pharmacy, like to pick up a cholesterol medication, that might be actually used for a bunch of different purposes. There's tons of drugs that are used for a whole bunch of different purposes, but like, it doesn't matter. And the doctor doesn't have to look into why, the pharmacist doesn't have to look into why, you just go fill the prescription. As opposed to this where like the person dispensing has to figure out, do you need this for a legal purpose or do you need this for an illegal purpose? I mean, and that the difference in consequences for the prescriber and the dispenser are many, many years in jail, or like it's totally fine and there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think we could talk a little bit about the other states too, and like why maybe they didn't do this, right? Because this came out of nowhere in Louisiana, showed up without that public process, without an opportunity. And when those were the circumstances, Louisiana passed this law. And in the other states where they had debate, they had conversation, in those states, the law didn't pass, right? Because I think everything that we're talking about, when given an honest and opening to have those conversations, dissuade people from wanting to do this. And so I think it goes back to what Alex was saying about Article 3, Section 15, and like these germane amendments.
So I don't know, I think we should probably wrap because I think you have to go, Jamila. But on behalf of both of us, I want to thank you guys for being here. We really appreciate it. And I appreciate working with you guys on this whole fucking clusterfuck.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys want to say anything before we go about where we've been, where we're going, or any sort of closing remarks.
Thanks so much for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fine too. Yeah. Nope. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. Michelle and I will be back next week. Actually, I think only Michelle will be back. We have a special guest next week. And in the meantime, then, yeah, we're now available on YouTube where you can see our loveliness, all of our loveliness.
I am not wearing makeup today, so do not
mine
judge
looks like
that situation.
Yeah. I mean,
You
this
look
is
gorgeous.
my ongoing struggle every fucking Saturday. And I have to try to look sort of normal. Michelle knows well how totally I am. Anyway, rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. And yeah, check us out on YouTube. And thanks, everybody. Thanks, Alex and Jamila. And see you guys next week.
Seriously is presented by Lift Louisiana, a nonprofit organization advocating for reproductive health rights and justice.